Hello. So let's say you have thousands of shares in your portfolio and they're just sitting there. Is there more that you could be doing with them? Yvonne Goh thinks so. She's from Phillip Securities, where she's the assistant manager of share borrowing and lending. Yvonne, what does that actually mean? Why would you borrow or lend shares?
Okay, securities borrowing and lending, there are actually two parts to it. First, people do borrow shares, and then there is a lending part to it. For today, we're actually talking about lending, okay?
In other words, you've got shares and you want to lend them to somebody else.
That's right. Okay, so for securities lending, people will actually lend their shares out for incremental income. Okay, it's like rental income. If you have a long portfolio and you want to, and you're not selling the shares anytime soon, you can actually lend the shares out and get a lending fee from it.
Right, so let's say you have 10,000 Capital and shares. Who would you firstly lend them to? Why would anybody pay you to borrow those shares?
Okay, there are a few reasons for securities borrowing. Okay, firstly would actually be shorting the market. Okay, besides shorting the market, there are actually a few other reasons, which includes rights arbitrage or cross-border arbitrage.
In other words, somebody needs to have your shares but doesn't want to buy them. They just want to keep them for a little while. For example, when they're selling shares they don't own.
Selling shares they don't
own. In a short position.
Right. That's right. Okay. There's also another reason for borrowing shares, which is to hedge. So market makers, they actually need to hedge their position out so that they don't take the market risk for the shares. So for capital lend, mostly if we borrow it, it's meant for hedging purposes.
Right, but it could be for any shares, I assume. Does
right.
that impact how much money you get?
Yes. Different counters will actually command a different rate in the auction market because securities borrowing and lending is actually a very over-the-counter product. Okay, and mostly institutions will actually take part in the securities borrowing and lending market. So in general, for blue chips, the rates will be lower because there's a huge supply in the market. Okay, for small caps to mid caps, the rates in general will be higher.
So what does the investor, the one who's actually lending their shares, what do they feel out of all of this? I mean, do they know who the shares are going to? I assume that's not transparent to them, right? They don't really care as to what happens to the shares that are being lent.
Okay, for every single transaction for our retail clients, the counterparty is Phillip Securities. So Phillip Securities is actually the borrower for all their shares. So as to who is being lent out, what we do is we actually pool the shares together and we lend out in about to our institutions or our hedgers. And
then the credit interest is credited to your money market account, I assume, or your share trading account.
Okay, the interest, the lending fee credited, is actually credited into the client's securities borrowing and lending account. Okay?
So that's a separate account that you'll establish?
Yes, it's a separate account. Including the corporate actions which they're entitled to, it will also be credited into the securities borrowing and lending account. Okay, we need the account actually meant for audit issues. Audit trail. We need it for an audit trail.
Yeah. So when you say that the corporate actions, what sort of corporate actions could you expect?
Okay, the corporate actions would actually be dividends, rights issue, bonus shares. For all corporate actions, our lenders will actually be entitled to whatever they're entitled to.
Right.
Yeah, because even if clients lend their shares out, they're entitled to all economic benefits with the exception of voting rights, where they actually have to inform Phillip Securities earlier, then we will give them a proxy letter.
Right. So in other words, you still retain ownership, you still retain the economic benefit. There are some voting issues, but it's as though you've just got them sitting in your portfolio. So the choice between having them sit in your portfolio and do nothing, or actually lending them out, at least there is some benefit from lending them out elsewhere.
That's right.
Now, you mentioned that blue chips attract a different rate than the other type of companies. So generally speaking, what sort of percentages are we talking about?
Okay, for the lending in Phillip Securities, for most counters, we actually give between 0.25% to 5% per annum. For blue chips, you're actually looking at between 0.5% to 1%. Okay.
So much higher for the other companies.
That's right. The small to mid caps, it will be much higher.
And what if you want to sell the shares that you've lent out?
You can sell them anytime you want to. The lenders can sell them anytime they want to. SBL will actually deliver the shares for the client on the due date of the sell contract.
So what sort of investor should you be to be interested in share lending? I mean, do you need to be a large investor with, thousands and thousands of shares? Or what if you only have, as I was saying, maybe 1,000 CapitaLand shares or something like that?
Oh, that's fine. Okay, in Phillip Securities, we actually accept the minimum quantity for lending will be 1 bought lot. Okay, that means if the bought lot is at 1,000, we will take 1,000.
Right.
Okay, if the bought lot is 10, we will take 10 as well.
Or SIA 200, it would be those 200 shares.
That's
so this
right.
is something that virtually any customer who's got shares can do.
That's right.
So what's stopping them? Or what is the risk? Or is there anything else that people need to know before they venture into this?
Okay, the risk which all our lenders will face is actually the counterparty risk. Okay, their counterparty is actually Phillip Securities. Okay, and being a reputable financial institution, the counterparty risk is actually minimized. On top of that, we actually have to collateralize all our lenders for their shares which is being deposited into their SBL account for lending.
Again, you know, when you think about share lending, it sounds so obvious, right? You've got the shares, any amount of shares by the sounds of things, you can earn interest on it. Is there any reason why anybody would say, no, this is not for me?
Okay, there's some belief in the retail market that if they actually lend the shares out, people used to short the market, okay, and they will actually depress the price of the shares.
And is that actually a valid belief?
There are some studies have shown that because whatever that is sold will ultimately has to be bought back. So in the long run, some studies have actually shown that securities lending does not aid in the depressing of the share price. It adds liquidity and transparency to the stock market.
All right. Okay, so finally, if anybody's interested, how do they get started in this?
They can drop us an email. Okay. Firstly, they have to open the SBL account and then submit the one-time lending agreement. Okay. After which if their shares are actually in CDP, they have to deposit the shares, transfer the shares from CDP into Phillip Securities to be made available for lending. At the moment, we are actually waiving all the CDP transfer charges. Okay, that means whenever lenders want to deposit their shares in for lending, SBL will actually waive the transfer charges at 10.70 per counter.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming in to explain it.
Yvonne
Goh from Phillip Securities, one of the sponsors of Singapore Investment Week 2013. Here is the website for more information. Thanks for watching.